Radicalized parking warden detained for overseas, armed violence plans, Ministry of Home Affairs. WHO. Ministry of Home Affairs, MHA, announced on Friday, May 11, that a radicalized Singaporean parking warden was detained, under the Internal Security Act, ISA, last month. Mohammed Faisal Maud Razali, 27, had wanted to undertake armed violence overseas, said a report by Today Online. How? In mid-2016, he used the internet to improve his religious knowledge, and took in the teachings of foreign preachers including Ismail Menk and Yusuf Estes. These two preachers had been banned from entering Singapore, as they were known to preach segregationist and divisive teachings. The radical teachings of the late radical cleric Anwar al-Awlaki also influenced Faisal. Over time, he became convinced that waging armed violence was legitimate and would help redeem his sins, according to a statement by MHA. What happens next? Faisal then began preparing to undertake armed violence overseas, in places including Syria, from last year. He started searching online for a religious authority that would support him. He also mentioned his plans to his friends and family members, who tried to dissuade him, but to no avail. ISD Counter-Terrorism Center hotline at 1800-2626-473. Someone then alerted the authorities about his plans, said the MHA without elaborating. Faisal's detention was a reminder that the threat of terrorism and self-radicalization through online, extremist propaganda remains alive, said the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, MUIS. Internal Security Act. Anyone who knows or suspects that a person is radicalized, should promptly call the 1800-2626 ISD. MHA will not hesitate to use the Internal Security Act to deal with individuals who are radicalized and have engaged in terrorist conduct. This includes any person who supports, promotes, undertakes, or makes preparations to undertake armed violence, regardless of how he rationalizes such violence ideologically, or where the violence takes place. Who started terrorism? Why is it being spread all over the world? Terrorism has existed for as long as human beings have used unlawful violence to attain a political goal. In the recent past, the failure to stabilize Afghanistan after the toppling of the Taliban, 2001, and Iraq, after the USA-led invasion in 2003, also played a part in these areas, becoming fertile ground for extremist groups. The advent of social media is a major reason for the spread of terrorism around the world. Terrorist organizations are able to communicate more effectively, and recruiters are able to target their victims anonymously. Terrorism has become an international problem because supporters/members of ISIS are encouraged to carry out attacks in their home countries. How do people get radicalized? The medium of radicalization could differ, according to the society and country that people live in. In certain countries where the laws are less strict in preventing violence and ill will between races and faiths, there are popular radical groups that openly promote hatred and the use of violent means to pursue political and religious objectives with impunity. People are at risk of becoming radicalized after joining these groups or listening to their teachings. In countries with tough laws, it is more difficult for such groups to operate, and thus people would more likely be radicalized online. It is important to note that radicalization is a process in which individuals' political, religious, and/or social views become rigid and extreme, often leading to violence or the support of it. How do terrorists brainwash their victims? Terrorists brainwash their victims by convincing them that what they aim to achieve serves a higher purpose. Terrorist recruiters have increasingly resorted to looking for vulnerable individuals online, where they are able to communicate with their victims one-on-one without being identified. Most terrorists brainwash their victims by means of religious and/or political ideology. For example, victims are told about the alleged atrocities committed against Muslims in the Middle East. This is followed up by using misguided arguments, such as the argument that it is necessary to take revenge by carrying out jihad. Many individuals are radicalized over time. It could take years, by a combination of factors, including exposure to persuasive ideology, religious sentiments, and life experiences. What are the true motives of people who do acts of terrorism? The motives of people who commit acts of terrorism could differ according to their background, society and country, and might or might not be driven by their religious beliefs. It is important to note that individuals who engage, or plan to engage in violence may not, necessarily be Islamist extremists. For example, one Singaporean had attempted to join the Kurdish militants in Syria to fight ISIS. He was detained in 2016. His motive appears to be non-religious but more personal, and the desire to fight the brutality of ISIS. Regardless of the motives, it is unacceptable to attempt or engage in acts of violence, however one thinks that one's cause is right. It is similarly wrong to exploit issues of religion, race, morality, and nationhood to garner, support and justify acts of terrorism.